What is up, Sopranos fans? Kino here, and we are back with Day 3 of Sopranos Timber. Today we're looking at the third episode of Season 6, Mayham. Now, the episode opens with Vito giving Paulie a tip on this Colombian gang's hideout. He says that there's a lot of money stashed away there, and that they should be gone by around noon. However, when they arrive, they find that the gang is still there, and it erupts into this big fight. They manage to kill the Colombians, but Paulie gets kicked in the nuts, as usual, and he's pretty injured by this. However, despite, the bloodshed and all the mess that they leave there, they manage to find around $1 million stashed in the hideout. Meanwhile, Chris and Bobby talk to AJ. They learn that he was trying to find a gun in order to kill Junior, and they tell him that he can't do this. One, Junior's locked up in federal holding, but two, Tony would not want him involved in this way. Tony doesn't want his kids to be involved in any kind of crime, and they tell him to, just let it go. Meanwhile, however, Tony's condition is continuing to get worse. They're not able to, regulate him and keep him stable anymore. And this really upsets Carmela to be faced with the possibility that Tony might die. Carmela runs into Melfi at the grocery store later, and Melfi says that if Carmela ever needs to talk, her door is open. Carmela declines, but she's very clearly, upset by all this stuff. She's fried, she's tired, and she really does need to express herself. Later, she blows up on AJ after a news story comes out where he talked to the press, and she says some very mean things to him that he's basically a cross to bear for their family. So all this makes her realize that she does need to talk, so she ends up going to talk with Melfi, and she tells Melfi that she's worried that their criminal lifestyle is ruining their children. They're being exposed to all these news outlets talking about them, and they've had to pay the price for, Tony and Carmela's sins. Carmela knew who Tony was when she started dating him. She accepted that. She even kind of liked all the money and power that he had, but she doesn't like how it's affecting their family like this. Meanwhile, Silvio continues to act as acting boss while Tony is in the coma. There's an interesting detail in that he tells his wife that before Jackie Sr. passed away, he briefly considered Silvio taking over as boss instead of Tony. And I think this detail is also kind of a reference to the fact that the actor Stevie Van Zandt was considered for the role of Tony for a little while, before they decided to go with a more experienced actor in James Gandolfini. However, Silvio has to continue to mediate conflict between the guys. There's a lot of problems that he has to constantly solve. Number one, there's a dispute between Bobby and Vito over a route that Bobby is collecting on. Silvio eventually rules that the route is going to go to Bobby temporarily, and then later on they'll figure out a permanent solution. There's also an even bigger dispute between Vito and Paulie over splitting the money from the Colombian job. Vito says he's owed 50% of the earnings. Paulie says that, he did the heavy lifting. But Silvio eventually rules that they each get half, which I think is a little unfair because this reminds me of the premise from season 4 when Paulie had that dispute with Ralphie over being owed half of the hijacking job that he did. And in that case, Tony ruled with Ralphie. So I think this is a pattern of, the boss is always going to rule with the guy who's earning the most money, in this case, Vito. However, Silvio also says that they each owe $100,000 to Carmela to help her pay for all the bills and everything going on right now. However, they both don't want to pay in case Tony dies. They're thinking that if Tony dies, they just handed over this money for no reason. And if he dies, they're definitely not going to pay. Even though Tony always says that the guys are going to support Carmela forever, we can clearly see here that they're not going to do that. They're only looking out for themselves. Meanwhile, Christopher and his guys kidnap JT Dolan from this writing class that he's running, and Chris tells him that he has to write a movie script for him in order to pay off his debt that he owes Christopher. Chris wants to make a slasher film about the mafia. He wants to, finance it and run it and then collect the money from, distributing this film everywhere. And he partners with Little Carmine to finance the picture, and he brings on all their mafia associates as potential investors. Eventually, Dolan kind of fleshes out the script, borrowing a lot of details from Christopher's life that he wants inserted into there. And he comes up with the title of Cleaver, and that's the film that they're going to make this season. However, the guys kind of struggle to really understand, the plot and what the movie is even really about. Meanwhile, Silvio struggles under the pressure of being boss. It's incredibly difficult to keep everyone happy. They all want different things. They're always at each other's throats. And eventually he collapses from the stress of it all and winds up in the hospital himself. Meanwhile, Paulie goes to visit Tony, and he starts yammering on as he usually does, talking about his usual bullshit. And we see Tony's heart rate actually start to increase, even though he's in a coma. Paulie talking just really annoys him. And it's funny, in his dream, Tony hears a annoying noise on the other side of the room, in his hotel room, and starts banging on the wall telling them to shut up. So even in Tony's coma dream, Paulie still annoys him. Eventually, though, this leads to Tony's heart stopping completely, and the doctors have to rush and try to save him from dying. Meadow and Carmela, are crying out for Tony to come back to them, but it's looking like he might die in this situation. Now, I know, again, just like last episode, I didn't touch too much on the dream in this review. Go check out my coma dream video. I cover everything I want to talk about in that video. But I will talk about this last little segment here. So Tony in the dream arrives at the inn at the Oaks house. He's going to the Finnerty family reunion, and they're inviting him into the house, which seems like if he goes into the house, he's going to die. It looks like that's him crossing over, going into the light kind of situation. And he's about to go in. He's about to give up his briefcase and, let it go, so to speak. But he hears a voice in the wind. He hears the voice of a little girl crying for her father to come back to her. And this is clearly Meadow's voice. She's always been kind of the guardian angel for him, keeping him safe. And in this situation, she does the same thing. Tony sees a white light, and he finally wakes up from his coma, and he's back from the dead, so to speak. Now that Tony is awake, Vito and Paulie rush to get the money to Carmela. They're worried that Tony might be expecting the money, and they need to get it to her pretty quick, or else they're going to look like they weren't supporting him. They hand over the money to Carmela, but Carmela can see that they're very unhappy about it. Despite everything they say about being a family and supporting each other, ultimately they're only looking out for themselves, and it's always, always, always about money in the criminal life. But that is the episode Mayhem. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next Soprano log coming tomorrow. On the third day of Sopranos timber, my Gumar gave to me 3 French horse, 2 Tonys, and a Sopranos prequel movie. Special thank you to my patrons Hunter, Tommy Smith, Abdallah Alamari, George Jones, Russell, Sean, Graham, Rooftop, Rico Bellick, Heart of Markness, Broccoli, Isaiah, Placenta Juan, Logan, Clean, John Reyna, Lance Klump, Jesse Sterling, Andrew Stewart, James, Conchok Choful, Obstacle Racing Media, and Daz J. Kit.